Blessings and greetings and blessings for those who are live, because we're going to stay live in this most potential of moments with the intent of being configured. Torah Chaim, instructions of life, Torah Chesed, instructions of mercies, instructions of mercies, and now I guess we're back live here, and I guess on Facebook now. We're also going to be streaming live, very good. And we're having some trouble with our Blog Talk Radio network. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me as I call our friend, our co-host, Dennis Ryan, to hopefully bring him into the conversation, because for the second week in a row, Blog Talk Radio is not functioning properly, and they're admitting it. Perhaps this is the end of our relationship with them, but let's see what goes on. Let's try to call Dennis. Let's try to call Dennis here. Please bear with me. Dennis. Let's see if we can get Dennis on the line. Just got to get his number. I hope you'll be able to hear him as we're turning down this 432 hertz music. Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Don. What happened?
Okay, so first of all, there's some sort of reverberation coming off of your phone. Okay. Are you on speakerphone?
No, I'm on a cell phone right now.
Okay, so right now we're broadcasting through Facebook and YouTube, where they can see me. Unfortunately, they can't see you, but we're going to try to do the program. If there's some sort of technical glitch with Blog Talk Radio, as I just mentioned to those listening in, it looks like we might have to cut a relationship and find another carrier, but that's not really for discussion now. In the meantime, blessed are the eternal Creator. Shalom, peace, and Brocha, blessing upon the entire human family condition. With the Creator's help, our next broadcast is taking place right now. It's now the 10th of November, I believe, and it's 11:02 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, live from Turtle Island, aka the USA Unified Soul Actualization. And today's discussions will encompass sharing the written and oral Torah traditions of Israel regarding King Solomon's Proverbs, one of the most powerful teachings from the Israelite Tanach, Torah, prophets, holy writings. Our call-in number. Well, right now, you won't be able to call in because we're not on Blog Talk Radio. People want to make a comment on Facebook Live or live streaming on YouTube, they can do so. But we basically been limited, Dennis, and it's very painful to see this occur, but stuff happens in the world and we have to go further. So, Dennis, I was thinking, and we're going to turn down this music. This is deep healing music from 432, or actually 528 hertz. So let's just turn down and get on with the show. So, Dennis, I was thinking about this. You know, there are different types of exercises human beings engage in. There are push-ups, pull-ups. There's various types of martial arts exercises. There are isometric machinery, vessels that we can use. But one thing I think we don't consider to be an exercise, but it really is, something I like to call brain-ups, using the mind. I mean, I know you talk about using the brain, and I'd like to get your initial commentary on this, and then we're going to go into a prophecy about peace, and then go into what we usually call the logistics of opening up our program. So then it's this whole idea of brain-ups, using our brain. Our brain is an organ, but it also can be utilized as a muscle, not like the standard bicep or tricep or calf muscle, but it is something that exudes a certain amount of awareness if we use it or we lose it. Your take on these matters?
If you don't exercise your brain, it's going to sit there and idle, waiting for another human to come along to wake you up. But you are the owner of your brain. Therefore, you must massage it from time to time. And we do that by saying, what if you're the only person in the world? what are you going to think of? What are you going to do? In other words, what is the real you? The real you is your brain. And you talk to yourself. We do it all the time. But that doesn't mean the words come out of our mouth. We can have one end of our brain talk to the other. We think that we can only use our brain when other humans are around. Baloney. Sorry. You must be able to exercise your brain. And that is that you have a huge imagination that you must be able to use. Little kids do it normally. But when we start getting older, we feel like we can only think about our problems. No. You can think about all the good things that have happened to you and are still going on. So therefore, you get your mind off your problems and think about positive things. But you must be able to exercise your brain to the point that you must explore these good things to the full extent. It isn't just a question of saying, oh yeah, that's a good thing, and now you change your brain to another thought. No. You've got to be able to examine your own brain as to how far you understand all these things that are going on in the world today. Believe you me, there's more going on in your brain than there is interaction with other people. Other people are not dictating what's going on in your brain. You are. You own it, and you must use it. And it is one of the most powerful tools you'll ever have in your whole life. But if you're not using it, it's just going to sit there and like unused farmland that we call fallow will just sit there and molt away. Let the rain and the sun come and go? No. You're in charge. Your brain is always active. It doesn't stop. It works in conclusion with your heart. Your heart and your brain don't stop. If your heart stops, your brain won't function. If your brain is not functioning, you're weakening your heart. Either way, you must remember that you have a brain, it's active and it's yours, and you must always keep it going by questioning, thinking, examining, evaluating. You can do all these things, but you must be able to say, what am I in existence for? So one of the big things that we like to say is, can you say a prayer? That means you're recognizing our Creator, because He's the one, He, she, it, the entity called God, gave you the brain, and He gave it to you for a purpose. If you're not using it, it has no purpose. So some people say, oh, my brain can't take it. I can't take it. It's too many things going into my brain. Sorry, your brain is so strong, it can absorb any concept, ideas that you have. If you don't try it, you can lose it.
True.
But that's up to you.
True. I'd like to respond by saying, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, may his merits protect us, that he mentioned that every person has a unique role in this world. And when a person is distracted from their unique role, they don't understand the consequences of how it diminishes one little tiny aspect of the creation, and at that level creates a lacking of completeness in the universe. Like, so it's kind of like the many cogs of a wheel. If one cog is chipped, eventually the wheel is going to stop churning. Now, of course, the Creator is running the show, and He'll just find someone else to carry out the role that we were supposed to carry out. But it won't be the same, because at that point where a person could have accomplished something, they didn't. So there's a span in time until someone else comes along given the same mission and they're able to accomplish it. But why should you take two people to accomplish what one person was originally supposed to accomplish? I just want to respond in that way, Dennis. And that being said, before we go to our worldometer, talking about some real-time occurrences in the world, how many people are born, how many people are leaving the world, and the food distribution in the world, I'd like to give an example of a brain up. And the example is pretty simple. It's based on concepts in psychology called being mindful, mindfulness, or redirection of stress and anxiety. It's basically understanding that this is from the Hasidus, world of Hasidus, that how we put together the letters in our mind, whatever language it may be, that the thoughts in our mind, which are constant, that it forms a vessel for our intellect to operate with, which is in our brain. So when a person understands that their thinking process is the source of their, in this case, to be more exact, their speech. What are we thinking about before we speak? And why is it sometimes we get carried on with our speech? Because sometimes we thought about the matter, say, a day or two or maybe a year later, and it generates a certain type of emotion devoid of the original intellect that drove that emotion. But also the thinking process is the source of the vitality of the speech. And I was learning with someone last night, we're talking about this, and we're talking about the big test that most people have in the world, and say like 50 years ago, when I was a youth and you were much younger, Dennis, that people struggle with overeating and obesity to the point of morbid obesity. Instead of thinking of the joy of godliness and kind of connecting to God. So a person can actually, if he or she are firing all cylinders and they get the blessing of God at that moment, thinking a good thought about saying, hey, I have two arms that move, I have two legs that move, my heart is pounding in my chest, I'm able to digest my food, I can see, I can hear, I can smell. And to speak it out, words of gratitude based on thinking words of gratitude, and a person can actually become enlivened and feel like they've regained an energy previously before this thinking or mindfulness experience that they've encountered. So then it's like that thinking is the source of speech and is the vitality. And when the speech is positive and empowering and nurturing, not just for ourselves, for others, we feel more energized. Your take on these matters?
Well, there are some people who will hesitate for a minute or two to gather their thoughts together so that when they speak, they mention everything that they want to talk about. But then again, we have other people who don't wait a couple of minutes and they have to immediately burst out in speech. Those people that don't think about it and just start talking can talk nonsense sometimes, or they can miss the mark as to what they intended to say. So we are not perfect. That means everything that comes out of our mouth is not pre-designed to be a genius. No, we are designed to understand things and be able to explain it using the vocal cords that we have, so that we can put thoughts together so that other people can understand. But when it's in your head, it has no speech outlet, and it bounces from one side of your brain to the other. Now, we can handle that. What we can't handle sometimes is, do we know enough about speech to exact those thoughts that we're thinking of and translate them into the speech so other people can understand? So the whole idea is that we all have powers, human powers, that we can use, but we must be careful and we must be thoughtful of how we use them before we use them. So you must contemplate, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Am I doing good? Am I doing bad? We cannot just deal with this on an unlimited basis. We are confined that we must be able to act like humans. And humans say, I have powers, I have capabilities, I have motivations, I have linguistic abilities. But am I using them correctly? So we try to figure out what is the best way to use all our positive things that we have in our human bodies. The human bodies are fantastic, but it all leads from our brain. The rest of our body follows our brain. We don't do anything that our brain doesn't want us to do. So therefore, be careful, be thoughtful, and concentrate on what you're doing, because you must be able to understand before you start talking. Now, some people can see with their eyes, they can hear with their ears, but all that input, whether it's here or there, only adds to the total knowledge you have in your brain to be able to express what you feel, what you believe, what you understand life to be. We can never forget we are limited by our brain. And no matter what physical activity you're doing, your brain is the final factor in what you say you are. So, if we're only good as our brain, we must exercise our brains and use them the proper way. Now, I'm not going to guide you and tell you what is proper, what is improper. You must figure that out with your own brain.
Yes. I agree, Dennis. Very, very well said. And again, I want people to leave this section of today's humble presentation, the idea that you have a unique mission, whoever you are. I don't care where you come from. I don't care what faith or quote unquote they call religion in the modern terminology you are. I don't care what social class you're from. There is always a chance to get elevated. And there's so many stories of people who started with nothing and they became not just wealthy physically, they became wealthy spiritually, and they have legacies that are way beyond any sort of dedication on the side of a building or a business that so-and-so, this is the name, or in a hospital. You know, it was funny at Maimonides Hospital here in Brooklyn, New York, off of Fort Hamilton Parkway, there was a Dr. Avraham Gelman who lost his life during World War II when he was out in the South Pacific. And for many years, that his portrait was put there with a brief description. He was a doctor, passed away probably somewhere between 28 plus, 30 plus years old. And they redid the entranceway to Maimonides Hospital, and another family donated. So they didn't remove the remembrance of Dr. Gelman, who the Gelman family obviously had donated that section for the entrance of the hospital, but they put it to the side. The only thing you really can say is yours and your lasting legacy, I'm going to humbly suggest, and I'm looking forward to Dennis's comment on this, is the good that you do in this world, whether it be in good thought, speech, and action, charity, because no one can take away the goodness that you took away. They might try to cover it over, say, oh, someone was better than you, but who cares? If you're living in a world where you're trying to compete or be jealous of other people and hate them because they may be doing better than you, well, maybe they're supposed to do better than you because they have a certain talent, but the effort you put into do, say, be a little bit less of good, that's your role, and you might even get a greater reward. Dennis, your take on these matters?
Well, funny you should mention that hospital. I was there one time, and they had a bust of Maimonides over the elevators on the first floor.
Right.
And I always thought that was funny because you had to look up to see the bust, when in fact it should have been at eye level. But that's neither here nor there. But there is one other thing. I was reading a couple articles a couple of days ago, and there was the Scientific American magazine.
Yes.
And in it they said you must regulate your feelings. And I thought that was kind of funny because in the 11th and the 12th century, Maimonides said you must be able to control your feelings. And that fell into the idea and the concept of moderation in everything.
Yes.
You don't jump into things. You must be able to understand them before you take a step. So all this is coalescing to the point that nobody's inventing new stuff. This has been going on for a long, long time. Humans have been using your brain. You mentioned some people who start off with scratch, with nothing, and end up wealthy to a certain extent. You don't know how far your brain can take you until you learn how to use it properly and push it to the point that you do things that your brain says, let's do, and it sounds good, and you can understand it, and you can make a difference. Yes, you can. You may say, well, I can't because I haven't gone to all these fancy schools. No, you don't have to. You just have to have good intentions. And if you have good intentions, you will do good things. And that's really how God is going to be measuring us. Did you always have good intentions in your brain? Were you in control? Did you try to do better? Did you try to overcome things? So, there's a positive sign to life, and that is using your brain. If you're not using it, you are not enjoying a full life. So, use your brain. It's there, and it's yours.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. So again, back to the normal protocol that we have been doing for the past year plus. Today, Blessed Souls, 114. I'm sorry. No, let me correct myself. Well, I'll mention it. Let's start from the top. Right now, there's 8,187,000,000 plus human beings. That's 8,187 nuanced expressions of the divine image of the Creator, which connects to the human intellect. Today, in particular, there have been 171,000 plus spanking new bright babies crying and smiling and whatever they're doing. And unfortunately, 53,754 plus human beings have gone to the next level of life. So we see that. No, let me correct myself. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm making some mistakes here. 171,000 have been born today. 80,000 have gone on to the next level of life, which is again a 2-to-1 ratio. And it just amazes me that we've never gone out of this range of, for every person who passes on to the next level of life, there's 2 people being born. For public health expenditures, more than $8 million has been spent today. Did I say healthcare or education? I meant healthcare. If I made a mistake, I apologize. 5,440,000. Again, let me correct myself. Wow, I really have to put on my glasses. More than $8 billion has been spent today on public healthcare. More than $5 billion has been spent on public education, and only $2,300,000,000 has been spent on public military expenditures. One of my favorite subjects is that over 75 million bicycles, 136 million bicycles have been produced this year. Now, when we get a little bit more serious now, we're seeing that in terms of food, there's still over 883 million people who are undernourished in the world. That's more than 10%, blessed souls, of people living on the planet. At the same time, too, another troubling statistic is that there's 1,769,000,000 plus overweight people in the world. And then I guess there's a subcategory of obesity. I guess a person obese, overweight being over the ideal body weight, and obese people being much more heavier than the ideal body weight. And over $323 million will be spent today helping people with obesity-related diseases, and almost 90 million have been spent on weight loss issues. Now, another troubling fact is that there are so far been 725,000 human beings who have passed on because of water-related diseases. The water wasn't drinkable. Water wasn't healthy. And right now, as we speak, again, almost 10% of the human population, 759 million, have no access to a safe drinking water source, which is very troubling. But before I go to Dennis, I want to just flip back to this idea of how much is being spent on public military expenditure, which I saw this morning in a prophecy, which people are aware of. And it's also, it's engraved in a side of a wall, I believe, close to the United Nations. In Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4, talking about the Messiah, he shall judge between the nations and reprove many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not live sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. And the Radak and Mitzuda David, two classic commentators, mentioned that the King Messiah will judge, and there'll be tribunals convening on the holy mountain of Jerusalem, which will judge the nations and reprove the peoples. Now, in terms of plowshares, the beating of the swords into plowshares, this is not the entire plowshare, but the blade that cuts into the ground, known in English as a coulter. And as far as pruning hooks, these will be used for the vineyards. So, Dennis, if you want to address that prophecy on peace, which is actually inscribed on a wall, maybe you've seen it by the United Nations, and this whole idea of there has to be a reckoning of accounts with all nations to stop wars and to, who knows, quadruple public health expenditure, or maybe quadruple public education. But the main thing is days are coming when the nations will come before a prophet, a king, but not just for the sake of self-aggrandizing the nation of Israel, but eventually human beings can get to the point where, what's the point of all this war? I mean, even just recently this week, even with a new president-elect Trump, who was, for what, I don't want to go into the political aspects of this, but already countries are saying, it's time for us to start talking about peace. It's not just Donald Trump, it's that this is a heavenly call for nations to start to reconsider the validity of war, which is not too much validity to war, but rather the validity of trying to make peace in the world. Your take on these matters?
Well, war is a funny word. It seems like it's going to solve everybody's problems, but it only creates more problems. And why do people keep wanting more problems? Peace is a thoughtful thing. It means that you can understand everything. War means you don't want to think. You don't want to use your brain. You want to use physical retaliation. That, to some people, is the most satisfying thing they can think of. That is their problem. Don't make it yours. People want to fight, argue, fine. There was a famous economist, English economist called Malthus, and he had theories in the 1800s that said the population is going to exceed the number of people that can be fed on the earth.
Yeah.
And that will lead to disease and war, because people are going to be fighting over food. Well, that didn't work out at all. We just increased in our industrial world the production of food. We created all sorts of combinations of things. And believe it or not, we're worrying about people who eat too much food, who are overweight. There's no reason for people to be overweight because they're indulgent. They're indulgent in what they believe is satisfying to them. But as a human, you have a responsibility to take care of your mind and your body. If you forget about one, the other suffers. So therefore, we don't need war. War doesn't really satisfy anything other than the people who have anger and hatred. But what about the word love? We all can love each other. Adam and Eve did, and look what happened to the world's population. Yes, it expanded, and it's continuing to expand. We are not losing more people than we are gaining. more babies are being created than people who are passing away into another life.
Right.
So be it. That's how our Creator set up our planet. You must be able to fit in to what our Creator's thoughts are. And they are peace, happiness, and wonderful living. If you want to do something other than that, you can. But you are going against the grain. War is not a positive thing. It has uncontrollable bad things for many, many different people. So why even go there? If you can't settle an argument between two people, why must you make it physical? Mentally, we can handle anything as humans. We have the capability of doing it. It's when we give up on the blessings that God has given us, especially a mind, and we don't really use it, but we want to turn everything into a physical equation, that we must settle this physical equation in terms of war. What's in it for both sides? Both sides are going to lose. Why even go there? There's nothing wrong with peace and happiness.
True. That is, I like that. Listen, the Rebbe mentioned that the reason why we'll see a cessation of warring is that there will be a exponential growth in the knowledge of God, of the Creator, to the point where we'll be so captured by the idea that this great God who created, the constellations and the firmaments and the depths of the ocean and all the planets that we're aware of, because there's no reason to say there's just, 9 planets until Pluto. There's nothing to suggest there's less planets. In fact, the Rebbe was once asked what he thought about the idea of life beyond this world. He said, why would you want to limit the Creator, saying there's not life? Well, how could you limit? He could make life beyond this world. It might not be as we understand life. That's one thing. That's another issue, but he didn't really elaborate on that. And in fact, one time there was talk in the 60s, heavy talk in Europe. I'm too young to remember it, but I do remember when, was it Apollo 9 or Apollo 11 landed on the moon? And the Rebbe was asked, what about this idea of going to the moon? He said, well, you can go. I don't really see the, what the ultimate, big game plan or the big forest from the tree of the accomplishment of landing on the moon is. But there's something on the moon that I'm not going to tell you that's there. And if I told you, it might shake you a little bit. So, it could be an angelic realm. Who knows what's going on? There's just few things we know, and the little that we know, we start to claim that we know everything, which is really foolishness, as the Rambam says. Even if a person would learn the entire Torah, the conclusion that you come to is they really know nothing, because that's only that little slice of the pie of godliness that they've accessed, as opposed to the bigger picture. And as the Rebbe once also mentioned, that show me a person who knows everything, and I'll prove to you he doesn't, because he can't explain everything he knows to even one person. So we all have our certain limitations as human beings, but we're all part of this process. So then it's getting back to, not just discussion about cessation of war. We talked about it last week, the whole idea of city harvest in New York City, recovering food which otherwise is lost because of wasteful spending. I just want to mention, just as an aside too, before you make your comment, is I was in a class this morning, and the teacher, Rabbi Moshe Klein, was saying, it would be a wonderful thing if, people make such these lavish weddings. Recently, I mean, it's a little tough to say, but recently there was a wedding in the Jewish community that cost $1 million, which is an excruciating large amount of money. And say if it was like $50,000, which is still a lot of money, where all that money come on? And we're not judging those people, but he's saying that, at weddings, they should stop serving, all these lavish amounts of food. Because most people, when they get to a wedding, I mean, at least in my community, they get to like 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and they already ate. So why eat again? Again, eating food that you don't need is not a healthy health practice. So I just remember, and I wanted to share this with you. The best wedding I ever went to was 13 Jewish couples from Russia. They had arrived in the last year. The year before. This was in 1991, and there was a question if they were properly married under the context of a proper Jewish marriage. So there was a partnership between the rabbis of Chabad, the rabbis of the Israeli army, and the Sephardic rabbis, and they made 13 simultaneous weddings. And the food provided was not by any caterer, but all the people living on the mountainside of Swat, we all brought food. This one brought bread, this one brought dips, this one brought some meat, this one brought some chicken, this one fish. And the joy was, maybe it wasn't the most food I ever ate at a wedding, but it was the most enjoyable wedding I was ever at. Maybe this has been in other cultures too. In ancient times, in the times of the Talmud, that's how it was. The burden of making a wedding was taken off the shoulders of the parents, and it became a communal celebration, because after all, if a young couple is getting married and they're living in a community, it should be a matter of communal celebration. So you're taking this, Dennis, this idea of overdoing weddings and perhaps cutting down on the expenses, and trying to be more aware of the food that we're wasting could be the expense of energy which could have been used to feed those who really need the food.
The question is, when is enough enough? Maimonides preached for many years that moderation in everything. At first, it didn't make sense, but when you put it all together, when you want to have a good time, do you have to overeat? Do you have to overdrink? Some people say, well, unless I really lose it, maybe I'm not enjoying myself. It isn't a question of at the moment. How are you going to feel the next day? If you overeat, you're not going to feel too happy the next day. If you overdrink, you're certainly not going to feel good the next day. So why are you going and doing things that are considered overboard when enough should be enough? Where is the moderation to everything? Because just as City Harvest says, we don't throw away food because there's always a hungry mouth somewhere. However, if we don't understand that concept, that we must share the goodness that we have, where are going to we be as a human race? We share love. We have marriage, we have kids, and things seem to work out. But once we stop sharing, whether it's love, food, even our thoughts, even our prayers, things start crumbling down to a level that we have to fight to get back up to enjoy again. So why let loose on something when enough is enough, and you don't have to satiate yourself with anything else in the world? Be happy for what you got. Understand what you have. A good meal is a good meal. 5 good meals doesn't make it 5 times better. The first meal you had, and you enjoyed it, good. That's positive. And think you can replicate that 4 more times and have 5 good meals at one time? Your humanness will say no. You're overdoing it. Enough is enough.
Thank you, Dennis. I guess at this point, we're going to turn to the father of King Solomon, King David, in Psalms. And we spoke about this last week. And we're going to review, because again, unfortunately, in the audio version of Facebook, they didn't capture my voice except for the first minute or so, or 2 minutes. And again, there's a problem with Blog Talk Radio. Again, I think we're going to be terminating the relationship. I'm not threatening. I'm just saying, 2 weeks in a row, they really have to get their act together to get this production onward, that people can access these. A lot of people have invested into Blog Talk Radio. I hope it's not collapsing. I hope they're just making some sort of, repair in cyberspace, wherever cyberspace is. And as I once heard from Rabbi Label Groner, who was the secretary of the Rebbe, that he once asked some big guys in IT, and he said, "Where is cyberspace?" They said, "Rabbi, we don't know, but we know it works." But anyway, going now to chapter 3, verse 3 of Psalms by King David, one of the more painful compositions that he wrote, because he wrote that song out of the great pain that his son Absalom, I guess you say in English, was in pursuit of him, and in potential was planning to kill him. And ultimately, he was not able to, and he was foiled in his efforts. He was actually killed by the general of King David called Yoav. So here's chapter 3, verse 3. The great say of my soul, there is no salvation for him from God, Salah, meaning there was a very, very big pronouncement upon King David, where there were many people in that generation who criticized him and were justifying the fact now that his son was in pursuit of him. Now, the word Salah, which we just said the word Salah, it can mean eternity. It also can be an affirmation of that which is said, and it's also a musical instruction addressed for singers of the psalm. And it makes an emphasis and a raising of the voice, that the word Salah, which, as I just defined, according to the oral Torah traditions from the Ibn Ezra, is the only word that it's found only in the book of the book of Psalms, and also in the prophet Habakkuk, who also sings in a style very similar in Tehillim, which I want to mention parenthetically, which was brought out to light by Rabbi Shlomo Carback of blessed memory, that when the prophets would prophesize, they wouldn't just say it like a speech, like at a political convention. They would actually be accompanied by musicians, and they would sing the prophecy, because the efficacy and the potency and the truth of the prophecy was able to reach into the ears and the minds and the hearts of the listeners much more powerfully when they were being serenaded by the word of God. But in response to that, the fact that King David was greatly in pain, the fact that there were those who were speaking out and saying he had no salvation for his past actions, and that was the reason why his son Avshalom was in pursuit of him. But chapter 3, verse 4 is, but you, Hashem, or you, God, are a shield for me, for my soul, and raise up my pride. So King David, as he was regaining his sense of balance while being pursued by his son, was able to predict with Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, that the ruination which his enemies had predicted for him shall not come to pass. That's from Mezuzah David. That Chassam Sofer and Hirsch comment that close attention should be given to the changes in the designations of God's name as they appear. In the previous verse, David's enemies claim that he has no salvation from the name Elohim, which means judge, following the letter of the law strictly, not swaying from it. However, David replies that there is still hope for him, because he was calling on the name of God, which implies his mercies. And that's something that we should learn, blessed souls, as a very, very, very important point. When a person feels that they're at the end of their trail and they've almost given up, we can still supplicate for the mercies of God, which are endless, never cease. And I think this is where people get stuck. They feel like, actually, I saw something last night, it said in the name of Elon Musk. When you're having troubles in your life on a daily basis, you still have to take the time to enjoy the life you're living. And this is kind of like that way. King David was greatly troubled by the fact his son was in pursuit of his life, but at the same time, too, he could express with great confidence that I show that excuse me, that let me just get back to the that you are my shield, God, and for my soul, and raise up my pride, meaning my self-awareness that I can if I can't rely on you from the precise edicts of the law according to Torah, I can rely on your mercies, which are far beyond that which is the normative way of living the life that King David was living. Dennis, your take on these matters?
Well, I tend to be a little myopic on this subject. That is, you can hear a speech by somebody, you can hear a song, you can hear a long prayer by somebody. But if it doesn't have a calming effect on you, and you can't find something positive in what you've experienced, then maybe you're not looking at things in the right perspective. There's good in everything, if you can find it. You must be able to understand there's good and bad things in its mixture on earth. Look for the good parts. They're there. You're not trying hard enough if you can't find them. Why? Because everything isn't in the dark. There's always sunlight. There's always positive ideas. Somehow we have hope as humans that we will find happiness. Sometimes we can only find pieces of happiness. We can't find total happiness. But that doesn't mean you stop looking. That doesn't mean you stop understanding. God has given us a way to show that no matter what we do, there's always a little positive sign in what we do. Our minds must be able to understand that. And that no matter how bad things are, there is goodness. God created the world, and the world we live in is full of goodness. If we don't see the goodness, we're letting other people take our thoughts away and understanding. So we must have hope and not fear. If we believe in fear, then that's like giving up on hope. But we have gotten this far as a human race. And we didn't get here out of fear. We got here out of hope that there's something in the future for all of us, and we can all participate. And that's the good nature of our Creator. He hasn't forgotten us, and He never will. So you must get your brain attuned for finding what are the good things in life and shy away from those bad things. Because once the imbalance occurs, you will be thinking of dark things, and you'll be getting deeper and deeper into the darkness. No, He gave us the sun that shines for half the day. Enjoy it. It is positive, and you belong in that group of humans who have a future. It's positive. You may not understand it, but it's still there. Find it. You will enjoy it.
Thank you, Dennis. One more verse from chapter 3, verse 5. And again, going back to what we started at the beginning of the program, how thought is the source and the vitality of speech. So King David pronounces, with my voice I call out to Hashem, I call out to God, and He answers me from His holy mountain Salah. So Ibn Ezra, one of the great commentators, mentions that David sees God as his shield because he knows that to win, he doesn't even have to enter into a battle. Rather, by merely calling out sincerely with the voice to Hashem, his victory and safety are assured. Again, can you imagine the voice that King David called out with the confidence that he would be answered from the Creator? There must have been a lot of thoughts going on, a lot of deep thoughts from King David. And this whole idea that King David had so much confidence in God's response that perhaps he had tucked in there was a prophetic promise to him that whenever he would call upon God, he was sure that his wish would be fulfilled. Therefore, he felt as if God had already answered his request, and the response was a thing from his past. Now, the question is, in this verse from his holy mountain. What's the implication of a mountain being involved? Why does he have to answer from a holy mountain? I mean, he could have answered from the desert. He could have answered from a plain. He could have answered from a valley. So Radak suggests, one of the great commentators, that this might be referring to the Temple Mount. Although at the time it wasn't sanctified yet, they still had the tabernacle. I believe it was in Shiloh. It was in Shiloh. And King David, with prophetic perception, understood that eventually the site of the temple would be on Mount Zion, which is in Jerusalem. And for this reason, King David fled by way of the Mount of Olives. Now, those of you who have not been to Israel, or Jerusalem in particular, facing the Holy Temple Mount is the Mount of Olives, which from our prophecy say that's where the resurrection of the dead shall start. And from the Mount of Olives, one could see activity going to take place on the Temple Mount. But before there was a Temple Mount, there was still a Mount of Olives. And it is also there that is considered that at the Holy Mountain is referring to Mount Zion, where the Holy Ark was deposited temporarily at that time. Eventually it was brought in. There's a story how King David rejoiced before the Ark. A second time after the first time, there was a member of the Levite tribe that thought that the Ark was going to fall, and he died suddenly. That's a whole discussion. Again, you have to read. You can read this in Samuel Aleph. But the point is, blessed souls, is that the confidence that King David exuded by the very fact he called out with a voice and felt that he would be answered, again, testifies to the potency of thought and also, of course, the practicality of speech in the way of praising the Almighty. Praising the Almighty, who King David at that very precarious time of his life, and it was basically at the end of his life, was seeking the mercies instead of just to be judged as normally people are judged, again, is an instruction for all of us, blessed souls, that we should never forget, no matter what we're going through, we can call out to the mercies, the attributes of mercy from the Creator. Dennis, your take on these matters.
We go forward because we know God is a friend. He's a friend that's always on our shoulders. Why? Because he wants to influence our brains. And he's right there to do it if he's on your shoulder. You're always with him, but you have to accept him. Allow him to give you advice and show you the way. There are some people that somehow forget that, thinking that, well, I believe and I have good friends, therefore I can't go wrong. No, it's God is your true friend. And you must be able to realize that because you have a lifetime to fill in the understanding that we are not alone on this planet. Yes, we have other humans, but we even have some greater things. Our Creator is always there. He will never forget us. And all you have to do is ask for his help. But can you ask for his help? Do you think that you're smart enough and you know enough that you don't need his help? It's up for you to make that decision. However, I'm always be mindful of a great Yiddish joke that I learned a long time ago. And that was, what can two people do that two mountains can't? And I thought, well, that's a little too obvious. So I heard the answer. And the answer is, get together.
Mm-hmm.
Two people can get together. But two mountains, it's impossible. But then again, you have to live with that. But can you get together with other people and God? And everything will work out. God bless.
Amen. Unfortunately, two people's egos can be taller than both the proverbial mountains that you just mentioned, Dennis. So it's a matter, we also can learn from Mount Sinai, which is actually, it's brought down the oral Torah tradition, was actually one of the smaller mountains in the area in the Sinai desert. I mean, the Torah could have been given on Mount Hermon, which I've seen, which is on the Syrian border, on the border of Israel and Syria. It could have been given on Mount Moriah, which is, again, Jerusalem, side of the Holy Temple. But it was precisely in a place of desert, of desolation. And even you could say a desert is a place of despair for one finds oneself in the desert. Yet that tiny, humble little mountain was the place where the quote-unquote 10 Commandments was given. I just want to add that. So now going on to our final section, which is our basically the reason why we're doing these presentations. This is our, I believe, the 53rd presentation on the potency, the power, the eternal transmission of wisdom from King Solomon to all of us, Jew, or any other nations of the world, Gentile, if you want to use the word. I like to use B'nai Noach because we're all direct descendants of those 3 sons of Noach with their wives. In chapter 5, verse 5, we're just going to go back because we spoke about this last week without getting into the explanations that deeply. Her feet descend to death, her steps come near the grave. Meaning, again, the female gender is associated with the wanton woman, I hate to say the prostitute, and also different forms of idolatry. But again, if you go later on to chapter 31, in book of Proverbs, Mishlei, you see King Solomon does not spare any words to praise the woman of valor. Chapter 5, verse 6, lest you weigh the path of life, her paths have wandered off, and you shall not know. And where I want to end up is on this verse with a little bit of explanation, of course, Dennis's elucidation or feedback. Chapter 5, verse 7, and now, children, hearken to me and do not turn away from the sayings of my mouth. What is King Solomon trying to teach us? That from the beginning of chapter 4, this is from the Tzura David, another great commentator, since you have heard that my father had admonished me, and I was dear to him, you, the children of the living God, meaning all the people of the planet. I want to remind everyone, Bavitcher Rebbe had instructed Mayor John Lindsay of blessed memory to teach the teachings of Proverbs in the Sunday school when he was the mayor of New York and Christian Sunday school. I forgot what denomination he was. So you're hearing my admonition, according to Metzudas David, King Solomon says, but I'm admonishing you out of love and not out of hate. I mean, what's going on here, blessed souls? I mean, when a person tells another person, or a young child, I should say, don't put your finger into the electric socket, and they speak harshly because they don't want the child to suddenly, reach out and get electrocuted or get badly burned. So all these teachings from Solomon up to this point are exemplifying to us that he's passing on a tradition of admonition from his father to him, whose father loved him dearly, King David did. But these admonitions, these rebukes coming from Solomon, is because we shouldn't, so to speak, spiritually, emotionally, cognitively put our fingers in the electric socket and get shocked to the point of, losing our life or losing everything that we value, which is, that which is good. Dennis, your take on these matters.
Yes, there's certain things that we use between humans that we want to have a calming effect on everybody. And that is some speech, some songs, and there's other things that we do. You call it an admonition. Some people will say, well, that's a sort of a rebuke or something that's a stern command to other people. No, it was meant to have a calming effect, and that is to take away your fears and realize there's other sides of things. There's better ways of doing things. And we must remember, we don't want to cause harm. So to do no harm, we want to have a calming effect. It could be a song, a psalm, anything, music. It's what a brain is going to absorb and help us to understand. And it's far easier than 10 times if you understand it as being a positive thought help you. If you think it's anything else other than to help you, then you might reject it because it has no calming effect. So just remember, we can use language in many different ways. We can use music, we can use song, And we can use Proverbs. But remember, it's meant to have a calming effect, and you should understand the positive reasoning behind these words, thoughts, sounds, and every effect that we're talking about. Because if you can do that, then you will lose a lot of fear that you normally build up. We don't build our lives on fear. We build our lives on positive thought. And that's why our Creator is with us. Amen.
Amen. Dennis, I'd like to thank you for joining us today using one of your most, if not your most precious commodity, your time, which could have been used for other stuff, and yet you took the time from 11 a.m. to now we're about to strike the noon hour. We just did. I'd like to thank you again profusely, as I'd like to thank everyone else who's listened or watched the live stream. We're going to try to figure out, maybe we'll give Blog Talk Radio one more chance next week. If they don't figure out their technical glitch while we can't broadcast, then we'll have to move on to another network. In the meantime, I want to wish everyone a wonderful week, a peaceful and pleasant week, and to realize that we can all strive to, on our own very microcosmic level, engage in a world of Ahava Chad, one love, Gorel Echad, one destiny, Kulan of all of us. Badach Shalom. We're going to end off with a song I played going way back a couple of years ago, but I was listening to this morning again. It's called Kol Gal Gal, meaning it's the voice of the constellations moving in constant symmetry, being aroused by a great shofar, which goes into the depths of the levels of godliness. Basically, sharing with us this singer, Avraham Tal's insight or his perception of how there's a constant motion in creation and who is the one who is the catalyst of this creation for each and every nation, this generation, soul for relation, the Almighty Creator. So this is Kol Gal Gal, the voice of the constellation by Avraham Tal. Everyone have a wonderful week and hopefully to be continued. Take care.
ממטה למעלה, מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות. כל נעימות עולה ויורד, הולך ומשוטט בעולם. כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות, מסובב הגלגל סביב. כל גלגל המתגלגל, ממטה למעלה, מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות. כל נעימות עולה ויורד, הולך ומשוטט בעולם. כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות, מסובב הגלגל סביב. כל גלגל המתגלגל ממטה למעלה, מרכבות סתומות הולכות ומתגלגלות. כל נעימות עולה ויורד, הולך ומשוטט בעולם. כל שופר נמשך בעומקי המדרגות, מסובב הגלגל סביב.
That's all, folks.